Well, gang, I guess that wraps up the mystery. Welcome to another episode of the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo, the podcast where we delve into the mystery of Scooby-Doo media, getting clues from people who helped bring our favorite mystery-solving dog to life on various platforms, and maybe eating some Scooby snacks along the way. I'm your host, Alexa Lawler.
Scooby-Doo, where are you?
And it would have been mine if it hadn't been for those meddling kids.
Gang, we've just been handed our next mystery.
Blasted meddling kids.
Today on the podcast, we have Ray DeLaurentis, who is the creator of Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue. Get a Clue is one of the most commonly disliked series in the franchise. However, regardless of what you think of the series, I think it's still a great interview to listen to. Ray talks about a lot of interesting things from the making of the show, and without further ado, let's get right to the interview. Hi Ray, thanks so much for chatting with me today.
Oh, no worries, Alexa. I'm happy to do it.
Typically start off with a quick 3-question trivia game if you're up for it.
Sure, I will probably lose, but I'm happy to do it.
Try and start off with an easy one here. Question 1, what was the name of the robot butler / servant in the show?
I only remember calling him the Robutler. I don't remember if he had a name.
Roby.
Roby the Robutler. That makes perfect sense. As we get further into this, you will understand the randomness and speed with which we develop. I've done probably, I think I've probably written 600 produced episodes of animation since I did Scooby. So I may get everything wrong, but I did love the show. So there's that.
No worries. It was quite a while ago now.
Yes, it was.
Question 2, true or false? The first episode of Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue aired in 2008.
I'll say true.
It's false. The last episode aired in 2008.
Well, here's the reason I don't know that, because when I developed the series and when I wrote it, Warner Brothers was pretty much closing down. In fact, I wrote the last 2-parter with Warner Brothers basically out of business and them jackhammering the wall of my office because they had left the building at Warner Brothers. And it only went on the air in Canada because Time and Warner couldn't agree on anything. In other words, Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers fought about everything. So I never even saw the series on the air.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, it was it was a hit and run. It really was kind of, the whole situation was pretty insane.
Yeah, it sounds like it for sure.
Oh no, it was nuts.
And last question for the trivia. What gave the Scooby snacks the power-ups like speed, strength, etc.?
Oh, it was nanotechnology.
That is correct.
Yeah. I thought of that, so I remember that.
And to start off the general questions here, what's your relationship to Scooby-Doo? Were you a fan before working on it?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. I'll give you the full-blown answer. My kids loved Scooby when they were little, and so yeah, I thought it was a great franchise. It was very much a class to me. There's a math to developing shows, and Scooby kind of had everything. It was exciting. It was a little bit scary, but not super scary, so it kept kids interested. There was a talking dog, and kids felt like they were less scared than the 2 main characters, which made them feel brave. And so I thought it was very, whether it was instinctively developed that way by, whether it was an accident, or whether it was thoughtful, I thought it was really smart just in terms of being something the kids would naturally love. And of course they did, because Scooby-Doo went through 20 million machinations and is still popular today. So yeah, in that regard, I was a fan. I thought it was fun, and I would sit and I would watch the show with my kids. There is an odd sort of in for me to Scooby-Doo beyond that, if you want to know about it. But it's a crazy little story.
Definitely. Let's go into that.
Well, okay, so the year my daughter was born, and she's 23 now, and has her own little shows. I basically did a lot of development because I actually love development. So that year I had written 10 show Bibles, and toward the end of it, I had gotten comically brain dead from writing show Bibles because I write really detailed show Bibles with real jokes, real character dynamics, and they're not just fluff Bibles. And at the end, just to clear my head and as a joke, I wrote a one sheet called The New Scooby-Doo. And it was a joke. And it began, the new Scooby-Doo is exactly like the old Scooby-Doo, but different in every way. And it was an absurdist document in which I made fun of development documents. And, in that version of the show, Scooby-Doo is a deep sea skate and everybody else was still human. So they constantly exploded from being underwater. And it was just a crazy, crazy document that sort of maintained the sort of charm and sweetness of Scooby-Doo. Well, I sent it to my friend Kim Christensen, who was a VP of development at Warner Brothers at the time. We had worked together at Disney and at Saban and Fox Family. And she gave it to Chris Keenan, who was kind of head of development, and he thought it was hysterical. So I started writing all different kinds of things for Warner Brothers because I've always transitioned in and out of live action and movie stuff and all different forms into animation, which I always loved. And so I started working with those guys over there, partially because of my make fun, not of Scooby-Doo, but of development. And they thought my mind was really loose and interesting and original. So I did a ton of stuff for them. I actually did a show for Chris and them. And then when they were going to develop a new version of the show, Chris asked that, Betsy McGowan think of me because he liked my looseness. And I'd already done a bunch of things and the network had become fans. And Betsy had said at the time that they had actually had a show called The New Scooby-Doo, but no one knew it was new because it was exactly the same as the old show. So it had sort of gone this crazy full circle between this document I had written and the fact that they really kind of had a kind of funny problem with the show, no one knowing there was nothing new about it. So she said at the time, let's let Ray develop it because he's the only one that won't make it lame. Which I found a real compliment. And that is my introduction to talking to them about the new version of the show.
And so did they have a rough idea of what they wanted, or did you come up with a completely new idea all yourself?
Completely garage band over there. And, the truth of it is that most places other than where I worked at Nickelodeon for years after that, I ran Fairly Odd Parents and I was on a couple of overall deals over there. But they're much more traditional, old school, develop something to death and then don't put it on the air. And Warner Brothers was in a phase where they were just sort of trying to stay alive. At the time, Nickelodeon was the 800-pound gorilla that no one could sort of compete with. And they trusted me. And so they said everything I had written, basically, kids really liked. In other words, focus groups really responded. And so Betsy said to me, I want you to develop something that's completely unique. And I said, can I do anything? And she said, sure. And so basically, I had complete free reign. Now, of course, this was only to write up a document, not to make a show, right? This was just for me to present something. So I like development, and there's I'm good at it. I did a lot of it. I don't normally flatter myself. I'm good at it, but I will about a couple of things. I would say being a parent and development are two of the only things, and my jump shot. They're the only things I'll sort of flatter myself on. And so I sort of said, okay, well, this is fun. This is a classic franchise. Kids love this. This is really awesome. And I thought to myself, what is the kid part of me? What do my kids love about Scooby-Doo? And the truth is they love the mysteries and they loved Shaggy and Scooby. So I thought to myself, well, okay, if no one can tell the difference between any of the shows, maybe I'll do a show focused on just the two of them because they're really the money in the show. And I thought, in all these episodes, they're just these sort of vagabonds who, are scrapping for a piece of pizza and never have anything. And I thought, well, what would kids want for them? Because kids, when they watch a show, they either relate to the characters in that they put themselves in the place of the characters, or they just want to be with the characters. Either way, you want to kind of wish fulfillment fantasy for the kids watching the show. And I thought, well, okay, what if they were down to their last piece of pizza and Shaggy discovered that he had inherited his rich uncle's mega mansion with everything a kid would ever want in it. And I thought, that would be fun. I bet kids would like that. So then I said, well, what drives the show? Because that's obviously not a show. And I thought, okay, what if there's a mystery to what happened with the uncle? Because obviously I don't want the uncle to be dead in a kid's show. So that was step 2. And then I thought, okay, well, there's something nefarious going on. The uncle's a scientist. He invented something. And so I was sitting down with Matt Danner, who you may or may not know. He's a kind of a big time animator. He was working on, I think, Ren and Stimpy when he was in high school. And I'm actually working with him again now because he's one of the producers on my partner and I redeveloped Night at the Museum, the movie franchise, as a movie series. And it was originally as a TV series. Now Disney Plus is going to make an animated movie. And he's the animator on it. So I like working with Matt, and I like working with animators because they have very loose minds. They don't logic things out. They just sort of have inspiration. And it's partially the way my brain works. So, I make sense out of things after the fact. And he said to me, wouldn't it be cool if Scooby-Doo was giant and he was like Godzilla sized and he was battling another giant monster? And I said, that would be cool. How would you do that? And then in like a couple of minutes, I went, ooh, what if this, the uncle had worked on this nanotechnology and he left the technology in Scooby sacks so Scooby could actually transform. And Matt said, that's awesome. So I wrote it all down and I sent it to them, and I guess they sent it to kids. They focus tested it. And I'm sure, knowing the way these companies work, it's illegal to double develop in the Writers Guild, but they probably had 5 takes on Scooby-Doo. But apparently kids like that one by far the most. So they greenlit a pilot, and that's really the story.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's crazy but true.
And why did you want to take on such a different version of Scooby-Doo?
There were a couple of reasons, and one was because the sort of directive I was given was, this is the same old thing again and again and again, and at the time, fans had they hadn't gotten so much bored with it, but they couldn't recognize it as anything new, and so they were a little bored with it. In other words, other things had overtaken Scooby-Doo at the time in a big way. SpongeBob and a lot of other shows that sort of blasted by, Scooby. And so I was asked to sort of take whatever fun, crazy I could bring to the table. I was specifically chosen to sort of be loose and fast with the series. And once again, I developed it so differently because I really thought, honestly, from a kid's standpoint, that Scooby and Shaggy were the money in this series. And I wanted to just do a series about them. And then, of course, I needed, I needed villainy, I needed size, I needed sort of big fun. And like I say, the pieces just fit together in the way I described.
And going into it, was there anything that you wanted to accomplish or put forward with the series?
My whole point of view about writing kids animation, and I've written hospital dramas and dramatic movies, and I've written everything. It's kind of pretty simple. The reason I started focusing on kids and family stuff, and I had really done that a few years before I started running Scooby, was that one is a lifestyle choice. Honestly, it's that, especially in those days, I could run animated shows out of a bedroom office, and I could coach all my son's teams and be with my daughter and son all summer and spend time with my kids. And the other reason, which is closely tied to that, and my own kind of, well, the way I'm built, is that I started doing, the potentially much less lucrative, Saturday morning animated stuff. Now it's streaming animated stuff, because my point of view was, kids go through a lot. They struggle. They're bullied in school. Their parents fight. And if I can make a kid laugh at the end of what might be kind of a crummy day, then that was of value to me. And so my point of view with animation was, make the funnest, most escapist, craziest, wish fulfillment-iest version of everything I can make, because it takes kids out of their, their rut, and it takes them away and it makes them laugh. And so I think that the reason I went to the tone I went to was kind of for those philosophic reasons.
And I want to backtrack a bit here. How did you come to work in animation and just in the industry in general?
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, the industry is that's that's a long story because I'm still working. Although I have to say I don't look bad. I have been working in it a long, long time. So what happened was, I went to NYU. I went to Tisch. I went to the NYU School of the Arts. Film school. Um, and when it was really an art school, and it was way back when. And I went mostly because I wanted to live in New York City, and because I always loved New York, and we grew up in New Jersey, and when I was there, I sort of bumbled forward. In other words, it was like I knew I didn't want to be working in an office. I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer, which is what everyone wanted me to be. And so when I was at NYU, everyone had to write a script, and only one of four people got to direct a movie. So I thought, well, this will be interesting. Let's see if I can compete with, the NYU students. And I wrote a script, and as it turns out, it was actually a kids and family script. It was a story called Father Christmas about a little girl without a dad who makes a wish, and in a very funny, quirky, wacky way, gets a father for Christmas. And so I did it, and I loved doing it, and it gave me kind of a good feeling. And everybody liked it more than all the other scripts, mostly because the other scripts were so horrendous and pretentious. But I think almost completely because of that. But so at any rate, I said, oh, well, maybe I can write. And I went to Los Angeles because I had met a guy named Bruce Paltrow who ran a show called St. Elsewhere, which was a big high-end hospital show, like an Emmy award-winning hospital show at the time. And as a gopher, still bringing fruit baskets to the set, I asked him if I could write a script. And he said, he was a very funny, scary man. And he said to me in this voice, he said, write these two scenes tonight and bring them back to me in the morning and leave them on my desk. So I did. And long story short, I got to write some episodes and sell them some ideas for episodes for that show. But I knew I didn't want to write hour television because I didn't like the life, and I really didn't enjoy doing that. So I transitioned from that into writing some movies with my brother, who's much older but an accomplished writer, and he thought I was talented and asked me if I'd write some movies with him. And then I went on an overall with him to Fox and developed shows. And while I was there, one of the things I wrote was a kind of a crazy live action family show, a kids and family show, that was driven by a kid. And once again, I really enjoyed writing it. I enjoyed the whole feeling of writing it. So back and forth, I kind of did everything. I literally wrote everything. I took books and turned them into movies. I took video game characters and turned them into animated pilots. I took a screensaver and turned it into a cartoon that they did 80 episodes of at Saban. I sort of did everything, and at a certain point, I come back to the transition that I just discussed in our last sort of, in your last question, which was I got to a point where both my kids were pretty young, and I desperately wanted to spend a lot of time with them. And I realized if I could start running animated shows, I could make a good living, and I could be with them all the time. And that's why I did it. It was a combination of really enjoying it being something that they could watch. In other words, they could come to Warner Brothers, they could come to Nickelodeon, they could come to the places I worked, and they could see my shows on TV. They could come to Voice Records, and so it was just it was a really good sort of thing that fit really well with my sort of main priority once I had kids, which was to be a good dad, and so that was really the reason I did it. And like I say, I also, when I was writing other stuff, I would think to myself, what's important about this? And I couldn't find anything. I could do it. I mean, I could write, any of the NCIS series. I could write them in real time. I mean, pithy double entendre dialogue, I can really literally write in real time. And I went back and forth and did some things like that over the years. I wrote some Providence, which was a NBC show. And, I wrote more, sort of heavy-handed stuff that was more rooted in drama. And it wasn't hard for me at all. But I didn't ever get a sense of importance from the entertainment business. In other words, I never needed the entertainment business for my ego. And so for me, I needed to do something that I felt was somehow important. And like I say, and it may sound ham bone, but it's really honestly true. I did it because I thought I could make kids happy. So it sort of all dovetailed for me, and the funny thing is now I'm on the precipice of going back and getting a graduate degree so I can actually work with kids. And I'll probably get some sort of marriage and family degree because believe that, sort of all your psyche spins out of your family of origin. So it's like something that I love. So it's like, that's why I did it. Does that make any sense, or was that just rambling?
No, it definitely makes sense.
Okay.
And was there a specific moment that sparked your interest in writing, and when you realized that that's what you wanted to do?
The writing thing came strictly out of a search, right? So when I was in my first college, which was George Washington, I was a political science major, and the guy who ran the speech department wanted me to be a trial lawyer, which I think I would have been very good at. So I went to, he knew a dean of a law school. So I sat in on a law school class, and I found myself running across campus to get away from it, literally. And I realized at that point that I could not just go do a job that was that serious, that people were that serious about themselves, and that, and that was, I don't take things, I take life seriously, but I don't take myself that seriously. And it's sort of like, that wasn't going to work for me. And then I realized, I can't go to work in an office somewhere. I mean, I just couldn't do it at that age. It felt like I felt like I was in prison to me. It was like, I just couldn't do it. It wasn't free enough. It wasn't loose enough. It wasn't spontaneous enough. It didn't give me enough freedoms. And then when I was at NYU, I realized, well, in order to make a movie, to direct a movie, I had to write something. So I had to write something. It came down to that. And I thought to myself, well, I also learned that writing was kind of the fastest way into the business if you were coming in cold. And if you could write, you could get in. So there was a couple of practical reasons. And then when I started doing it, I actually liked it. And I found that I had a kind of a knack for dialogue, and a knack for story and a knack for character. And it was just sort of natural to me. And, I'm not saying I was any kind of a super genius, but it's like one of those things that, I'm bad with languages. I'm bad at golf. I was good at that. So people recognized that and they said, wow, this is really good. This is really good. And I said, well, thanks. That's very nice of you. And I started into the business, and then I didn't like the business at all. And I didn't like the whole feel of the business. And like I say, I had very little respect for it. And when I first went to my first job, I pull up outside in my crappy car from New Jersey, and there was a line of top of the line Mercedes sports coupes, and not only were they top of the line, but they all had come from Europe, so they were a European version. And as a 22-year-old kid, I thought, well, this is pretty cool. Everybody has a Mercedes sports coupe, and this is really nice here on the lot. This is interesting, getting rich in the entertainment business. That's kind of cool. And then I met the people, and I met the angry people with broken relationships and a lot of rage and massive insecurity. And I started saying to myself, I don't want to be one of these people. And so I that was the first sort of schism, where it's like, I like being creative, but I don't care about any of that, right? And so when I first started really enjoying writing kids and family stuff, because a lot of people really loved the pilot I wrote, and there was an agent, the head agent at a big agency at the time, read the script, and he said, and I was kind of repped by them, and he said, you could get rich and retire in the sitcom business. And I said to him, yeah, but I don't want to be in a room till 3 o'clock in the morning with 5 guys who don't want to go home to their wives, who don't like women, and who don't know how to break a story. Um, so that's not going to work for me. And he said, well, if you're going to do animation, I'm not going to represent you. You're not going to make enough money. And there was a guy at UTA who said the same thing to me, because I sort of went in and out of this business the whole time. And for me, it was sort of like, well, I'm not going to be miserable. This is my one and only life that I know about. I like doing this, and I'll figure out a way to make money at it. So then when I really realized the way I could still be with my kids, and doing something that I liked, it was like like I say, it all came together. It was like, I remember sitting in my home office and thinking, yeah, I could sell a show. I could be the story editor, even if I don't sell it. And I could write these shows out of my home office. And the years I was at Warner Brothers, I would jam a whole year's salary into, 9 months. I would get off on June 12th, which is the day my kids got off school, and I would literally spend every day of the entire summer with my family doing fun stuff for years without having to go to work. And I don't really know how any amount of money would ever make up for that. I mean, there's no way. And so, seeing the amount of freedom I could manufacture in the business of writing animation, it was just, I couldn't resist it based on all those factors.
And is animation a lot different than working in live action, like with the people and
Oh yeah.
the studio dynamics?
Oh yeah, it's immensely different. It's and it really depends, because there's all different kinds of live action, and I've worked in all of them. So if you're working in hour television, it's a kind of very civil, sophisticated universe. It's more like being a writer. You go into a room and you break the stories for the year, and you get assigned a story, and by the time you leave, you kind of know what the story is, and you go off and write it, and you bring it back. But it's also, network heavy in terms of, networks weighing in, networks. I mean, it's a high stress game. It's also very isolating, but it's kind of good. It's got good things about it. It's obviously lucrative if you're doing it. If you're working in more half-hour television, it's more fun. You go into a room, you break stories. People kind of kick things back and forth. But it is, you really are, for the most part, at an office all the time. And because I like kids and family stuff, there wasn't really an option to do anything good in that business. The Disney stuff made me cringe, and the Nickelodeon stuff was run by people I'd rather not work with. And that's the best way I can say that. So what I was doing gave me the freedom to sort of, for instance, when I was at Warner Brothers, right, when I did Scooby, when they picked it, they said, okay, go. You have no time to write a series. You have no staff. Write this as fast as you can. I had an office at Warner Brothers. I went in some days, other days I didn't. I tried to hire the people they wanted me to hire. They threw out all their scripts. I found a high-end writer who's a friend of mine who I still work with now, and I gave him every third script, and I would write. So I would run 2, he would write 1, and I went home. And I would be home every day. I'd be home when the kids came home from school, and I'd turn stuff in. And they really loved me, and they really appreciated how hard I worked. And focus testing, kids really loved this the stuff I wrote. And so it was much more of a freelance kind of entrepreneurial maverick life than those other businesses.
And circling back to Get a Clue here, can you speak to a little bit more about what the development process was like, and maybe more into what a typical day looked like for you on the show?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the development process, like I say, was super garage band. It came down to, what about Ray? Then Betsy McGowan saying, I think you do a good job on it. To me, spending, I'm going to say, 4 days developing it, and then writing up, really liking it, and writing up a 4-page document, which went to the development executive, went to Kim Christensen, went to Christopher Keenan, and went to Betsy. I think I got some notes on it. I answered the notes, and I made it better. And I may have gotten a couple rounds of notes, but it wasn't egregious. It wasn't much. They really liked it. Then they sent it to focus testing, and then at some time in the future, which doesn't seem in retrospect like that long ago, they said, let's write a pilot. And I wrote the pilot, and it wasn't long after that they greenlit a series. Might have been a month. And when the series got greenlit, like I say, most of these places I worked, Nickelodeon was very corporate compared to the other places I worked. Nickelodeon, when I left Nick, I had a 6-person staff. I went to work almost every day by the time I left. Prior to that, I had smaller staffs of super high-end writers, and we could write a lot of what we wrote from, my partner's house or my house or something like that, and we would go in for meetings. But by the time I left, it had become like running a sitcom. So, but at Warner Brothers, it was just, you have to get these in on time, and you don't have any time to do them. And I would say that the average time I took to write an episode was 3 days, and they were 22 minutes, and I did very few rewrites. I got very few notes. And then when I would get a script in from the outside, I would do literally, they would a lot of times the development girl would just write the word no on the third page and then say, Ray, I know you can fix this. So I would do page 1 rewrites, of these 22-page scripts that were train wrecks in a day. So it's a real burnout job to not have a staff. I mean, no matter how high energy you are, you start to get pretty punch drunk, as you get towards the end of the season. But it was really like a fly by the seat of your pants, go scenario. And the only problems I ever had, which were taken care of by the network, were some of the production people kind of got in the way and kind of got difficult in kind of very lame, control freaky ways that didn't help the show. But I didn't really have to engage in that. And I know one of the producers who never was given a chance to develop it and never actually was in any of the development meetings and never engaged in the process. I think he took credit at one point for developing the show, and then Warner Brothers smacked him down for that because he had nothing to do with it. And I honestly didn't care at all, because it was just a job and a fun job writing Scooby-Doo. And I would say that was the only bump. I remember there being some ugliness about that. And I also remember trying to get my friend Matt a co-develop by credit, even though we only had one meeting, because that's kind of the way I operate. And I remember Warner Brothers being difficult about it for some kind of weird legal reasons. But other than that, it was just go. And like I said, by the time I got to the end of the series, Warner Brothers had kind of folded, and they had sold the building to Amazon. Was going to rent space in DeVry University, and they had this huge office on the ground floor, which later there was a freeway wall paved outside of it when I was working there. And there were literally, I had wax earplugs in. I had one weekend to write the finale, 2 days to write a 30-page script from scratch. And they were literally jackhammering the walls to on the next office over, with pictures and things falling off the wall while I wrote it. And I remember coming home and just being in a daze for 10 days because I had written so much so fast.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no, because the truth of it is, I know that from the outside, people will say, oh, well, couldn't that have a series have been better? Or, why did they do that? And that was pretty weak there. And I don't know why, and I understand from a strictly, when you're on the outside of the process, why people would have all kinds of criticisms of things. I think what's very hard to understand from the outside is how hard it is, no matter how good you are, to overcome the internal roadblocks of, terrible notes, development people who don't know what they're doing, political infighting, people imposing their will on a show who, shouldn't be weighing in, schedules, which in the animation business are criminal, you know, um, and so, so it is very hard to make anything coherent, let alone something good. So, the process gets pretty crazy. And one of the things I really liked about Nickelodeon was, I worked with Butch Hartman there, who gave me complete and total free reign. I mean, no interference, zero. I could do anything I wanted to do. And because he was who he was a shield. So the network didn't mess with anything either. Plus, the people in development knew me from other studios and really liked me and liked working with me directly. And so I wouldn't, I worked very hard and I brought really talented people in to write those scripts. So, I mean, really, really talented, like people who ran live action, ran, primetime sitcoms and primetime hour shows and, big time people. And so we did really good work. But the thing I liked about it was they actually did give you the time and they gave you a staff. So you could really do good work, and prior to that, it's really was a burnout game because, they give you no time to do your work. I mean, it was just no staff, no help, and here's your crazy schedule. So it's hard. It's crazy.
Sounds like it for sure.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, like in Disney's another place where on the extreme end, they have staffs and they micromanage things to death. So on one hand, you can make something good. On the other hand, it usually ends up being homogenized into feeling so Disney that it doesn't have much life left in it. But at least they let people do good work, So for me, the whole career was always a balance between those two things. It was like people would come and offer me much more money because you get everything when you're the story editor on an animated international show. In other words, you get a story editor fee, you get writing fees, you get everything. So you really make a ton of money, but you have to go much faster and the show runs the risk of being really bad. So, I always sort of weighed the balance between those two things. And one of the other great things about Nick was, and I have to say to some degree, Warner Brothers is they did let me bring in some incredibly talented voice talent. And, animators, people who do timing, people who are directors, and people who do character design have such a huge role in bringing the visual part of your show to life. And then the voice talent really brings the show completely to life. Without good voice talent, you can write the best script in the world and it's just terrible. So, I got to work with some really good people at Warner Brothers. I got to work with Jeff Bennett, who played Dr. Phibes on that show, who's, in my opinion, the most talented male voice actor in the business, in the history of the business. I don't think there's anyone who compares with him. And just in terms of range and ability and smarts. So, that was great. But Nick actually, I also brought him in on every show because they didn't know him at Nickelodeon. I brought Jeff in on every show I did there. And they already had, just a battery of, all-star team development, voice actor people, And so that part's really fun. And if you're working for somebody good, you can, you get those people.
And when you were writing for Get a Clue, did you have a specific process at all or any weird quirks when you're writing?
Yeah, my process was I would wake up in the morning and I would say, oh no, I need to have a whole episode to them by Friday or Monday. And on the schedule they have me on, I don't know what the next episode idea is. So I would go through a creative process, sort of head clearing thing that I do. And I would just open up my brain and an idea would come in and I'd say, that makes me laugh. And then I would, for very many hours, build it into an episode that I thought worked, like stream of consciousness wise. And then I would clean it up a little bit, send it to them, and they would say, this is great. And then I would either write it or give it to somebody. And then the process would go from there. If I wrote it, then, I know I would deliver something to them that they would like. So although I didn't like hoarding episodes, the further behind I got, the more I had to write, because if I got an episode in, and I would say all the episodes other than the ones written by my friend Will Schifrin, who is really talented and who I work with still and who I brought in on all my Nickelodeon shows, You know, he was the only one that wrote episodes that they wouldn't throw in the trash can. So it was sort of like, and he was busy because he's a talented writer. So it was sort of like, you know, I had to, just for the purposes of speed, either do it with him, give it to him, or do it myself. And eventually. So it was really just a scramble to sort of stay loose and write as fast as I could. And, you know, I really liked the characters, and I really had the character dynamics so down, and I broke the stories in such detail, and that was interesting. That was part of the process. I would write sometimes a 10-page rough outline for a script. So by the time I got to writing the script, it was like, yeah, it was fill in the blanks and any new good ideas I had for story refinement or for a new direction I would just take. But for the most part, if I had to jam something out, you could write that in 3 days because you had 10 pages of, you know, you had everything. You had ideas for jokes, all the story turns, you know, already written and, you know, in a raw form. So, you know, I'm a big fan of getting the story right. You know, if the story's wrong on an animation schedule, you're kind of doomed, you know, and if the first draft is bad, you're kind of doomed because even at Nickelodeon, where they were, you know, they had way more money and way more time, the way the schedules work is this. You get 6 or 7 weeks, right, to get going. And during that time, you run into a lot of bumps in terms of your scripts because people are still refining the show. So you're lucky to have 3 scripts in the can when you start. And the way it works is first week, you turn in a first draft. Second week, a second draft. Halfway into the third week, a polish to actually go to board, storyboard, and to record it. Okay. And by the time you're to the 4th episode, you're doing 3 or 4 scripts that way. So in other words, every Thursday, you need another approved premise. Every Friday, you need another approved outline for the script before that. Every next Thursday, you need another approved first draft for the script before that. Every following Tuesday, you need an approved second draft for the script before that. Every Friday of that same week, you need an approved final draft, a record draft, right? So you're juggling 4 to 5 weeks in, you're now juggling 6 scripts at a time, all the time, till you get to the end of 40 scripts. And in what amounts to 40 weeks, you've produced 40 scripts that are being animated.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's what you're dealing with. And of course, shows that work, shows that are given, you know, sort of, you know, more licensed, shows that have talented people on them, shows that have more people from, in terms of coalescence, in terms of, you know, like the board guys are great, you know, the voice people are great, everybody's pitching and everybody knows what they're doing. It gets very collaborative. In those scenarios, you know, you can do it, and you can do it all great. And when it becomes a well-oiled machine like Fairly Odd Parents, even though I really redeveloped Fairly Odd Parents and made it a less mean, more fun show, you know, a show like that, a show like Phineas and Ferb, which is a show that literally used the exact same story formula every week. There was no variance in the way the story was built, to the point of, as a writer, I'd blow my brains out. But it was a structure that worked for them. And in terms of SpongeBob, where, you know, shows like that, you know, really work and they're really built to fly, you know, they sort of work as shows. You can do it, and you can do it well. But when a show has flaws, or when a show is difficult on another level, boy, those schedules are pretty hard to meet.
It sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty crazy. You know? They're pretty crazy. I mean, when Will and we developed Night at the Museum, which is, you know, a high-end movie franchise in terms of the writing, and we developed it for an animated kids show, and we were saying to each other when it was about to be greenlit as a show, before Disney bought Fox, canceled it as a show, and then eventually made it into a movie, we were saying to each other, we're going to die writing this show on a network schedule, or something's going to have to give, because our episodes were written at the level of a feature-length animated movie. mean, they were super high end. I mean, Sean Levy, who developed the series, told us personally that he thought some of the characters were better than they were in the movie franchise. So, we had no idea, I mean, how we were going to do that. But we would have tried. I think we would have lived through it somehow. It just really comes down to, like I say, how well the show works and how much time you have. But if you don't have 6 or 8 scripts in the bank that work, you're kind of doomed. And you're guaranteed, when you're talking about getting to episode 30 out of 40, that's how many you're writing, you're going to be punch drunk, no matter how much energy you have, no matter, how good you are. It's very hard. It's fun. It's fun. It's a huge challenge, which is really, to come back to an earlier question, one of the main reasons I became a writer was because I would have been bored if I'd done something that wasn't challenging every day I did it. And it is. So, and staying on a schedule is really challenging. And there were a few years there in my career where I didn't stay on schedules. And I sort of just made sure the show was good. And people forgave me for it because the show was good. But, I realized pretty quickly that that really wasn't an option. They don't care. They need the show in the can.
And for Get a Clue, where did the idea come from to have that one overarching villain in Dr. Phibes?
Me. It just came from me. It was basically, it's sort of, part of it was the math of the idea, which is what happened. I remember just saying to myself one day, and I have a pretty good memory. So I remember where I was sitting in my office and everything, thinking, okay, so what happened to the uncle? He can't be dead. And I thought, okay, he's a scientist. And I sort of went down that road and I went, okay, I know something that kids love, and kids have loved it since the dawn of animation. They love a villain who's 49% dangerous and 51% funny, who is sort of plays the version in the show of the wrapped too tight adults in their lives that try to over socialize them. The soccer coach who yells at them for talking, it's those people who try to get rigid with kids and over socialize them when they're little, right? And they want everything to be by the book. They want it their way. It's my way or the highway. Do what I do, not what what I say. Do what I say, not what I do. And you look back, Yosemite Sam, Squidward, Mr. Crocker. You can look at sort of any of those sort of big kids franchises that are money. The girl in Phineas and Ferb, whose name eludes me. The sister who always tried to ruin the fun. Candace. And kids love that character. And the reason they love it, because I've studied a lot of psychology, they love it because they love, like I say, people who are trying to control the fun, right? Who are maniacal in their own way, who just want to ruin your fun, who undo themselves because of their own psychological flaws and get themselves horrendously frustrated. Not only is that for kids fun, but it's actually therapy for kids. I would debate. And so I thought, well, I want to build this character that makes me laugh. And I did. So that's where it came from. And it's a funny story. When I was about 6 episodes into the show, the Warner Brothers development people took me out to lunch, and they were awesome. And they said, we're a little worried that the Dr. Phibes character is too big a part of the show. And I said, okay. I said, that's fine. I said, I can pull him back. I said, I think kids are going to love this character because I think they'd probably love watching him be frustrated. And they came back from a focus group a week later and said, can you add more Dr. Phibes? So, the thing is, I have good instincts with kids. Because I like them and respect them. And if you're a writer, especially if you write comedy or you write kid stuff, you really have to have a hold of that kid part of yourself, which I don't think goes away in anybody entirely. It's just that when we become neurotic adults, we lose touch with it. So I thought it was a good formula, both from what the show was, especially because Scooby and Shaggy are so comically clueless, which is part of what makes them lovable, and part of which what means you have to have someone else doing some of the talking sometime, because they just sort of do what they do. And I really like the idea in that series that they sort of bumbled happily and good-heartedly through their own stuff, and the villain just undid themselves every week. I just found that kind of charming, and it also, without the rest of the gang, there was really that's kind of the way it had to work. They could be smarter, they could get it, and they had to sort of elevate their sort of ability to break down the situation. But if you gave them sort of a focused path and a shiny object, they would always choose the shiny object because that's who they were. And I really think that's what makes them so lovably kid-like, and I think it's why kids like them, because kids say they're like me, but they're even more afraid. So I don't have to be afraid. I can be the brave one, and I'm even smarter, so I feel good about myself when I'm with them. And it's, if you look at the way shows are developed, you look at SpongeBob, right? SpongeBob he's a regular kid. He's, comically clueless in a lot of ways. Not stupid, but he's very average, right? So in order to make SpongeBob seem smart and seem like the star, you have to give him the dumbest best friend in the world, in Patrick. And that's how you balance the sort of that's how you balance the mobile of that show out, because every show is like, it's like, you know what a mobile is like, a piece of art where there's a main hanging piece and then everything else balances out on either side. And that's sort of the way shows work. There's a main character, and then you put something on one side and it tilts the mobile too much one way. Then you put something on the other side, and you just have to keep rebalancing it. So to make it feel whole and to make it feel sort of holistic. And so that's why I did it the way I did it. Once again, I apologize. I tend to ramble.
No problem. And going off of that, is that where Agents 1 and 2 came in as well?
Yeah, because when exactly, it's exactly right, because Fives didn't drive himself crazy enough. So I had to create characters that would drive him even crazier. I mean, I've watched kids watch cartoons, and nothing makes them laugh harder than when a villain comes to pieces because his sidekick screws him up, or because he gets screwed up by the funny, loose-minded hero. When Bugs Bunny messes with Yosemite Sam and he loses his mind, it kills kids. They think it's the funniest thing ever. So yeah, the idea was to go back and frustrate him as much as possible. And sometimes Scooby and Shaggy did that enough, and sometimes those other characters had to do the work for him. But you have to understand, and I'm sure you do by now, based on how little I had going into this series, I was making up things while I was writing scripts. So it was like, okay, this isn't funny enough. What do I need? And I say, it'd be funny if you had these sidekicks. And I would write them, I would run them by the network, and they say, we think that's funny. So I would add them.
And what was it like to play with the dynamic between Shaggy and Scooby and Dr. Fives and Agents 1 and 2?
It was relentlessly fun, I have to say. I mean, I would sit in a room and just laugh. It's a bunch of the shows. I mean, I always get to a point where I'm sitting in a room laughing at writing animation because it should be fun. And part of my own creative process is, you have to have fun doing it. If you're not having fun, you got to just not do it that day. You have to work hard, and you have to work really hard, and you have to be completely free of whether people will like it or whether they don't like it. You have to be completely free of what you're going to get out of it and just give to it. And you have to have fun doing it. And so they're funny, likable, lovable characters, Scooby and Shaggy. I mean, they're not two of the most enduring characters in animation history for no reason, right? So you have to be respectful of that going in. If you're in that business and kids adore these characters and still adore them, then there's got to be a reason for that. So it was very fun, and you know, it was a hoot. I mean, I had a lot of fun writing it. I would sit and laugh, and if that answers your question, it was a good time.
And did you have a hand in developing the character designs and the look of the show at all?
Not at all. In fact, I never particularly liked it. It was I can't think of his name. It was something like Lubinowski, uh, Panuski. I can't even think of his first name anymore. No, he developed it, and I thought they were. I mean, personally, I thought they were ugly. Um, but it was like, I have a sort of a rule, which is that I do what I do, and I don't criticize anybody for doing something I don't know how to do. So it was like, yeah, okay, the network approved it. They wanted a radically different look. That is what it is. I didn't particularly like the color palette. It was too muddy and sort of brownish. And I mean, what I remember of it, I have to, I have to remind you, I have never seen an episode of the show. I've only seen rough animatics and, like little sections of animation. And in those days, Warner Brothers didn't even go to Comic-Con, so and then the network had fallen apart by the time they were putting it on the air. Like everybody who still existed, which was about 4 people, were working at the ranch at Warner Brothers, in the valley at the studio, and the building was gone, and different people were about to rent there, and I was off working on another show, so I never saw it, but I did like it. I mean, I apologize for its imperfections because I think I could have made it really great if I had any time. But I did enjoy writing it, and I know the kids liked it. Which is really all I care about. I mean, if every adult in the world hates everything I do that I write for kids, I mean, I don't care. I'm not writing it for adults.
And did you have an opinion on the decision to cast Scott Menville as Shaggy at all?
I did not have. Well, okay. My opinion was respected at Warner Brothers. My opinion was gold at Nickelodeon. So at Nickelodeon, I had, carte blanche, top level carte blanche to make decisions. Because at a certain point, I had been right so many times that they just said, okay, you're overthinking this, you make the decision. But at Warner Brothers, it was a more political deal. And I remember really liking that guy personally. I remember him being a really good guy. And I remember the voice sounding to me like it maybe wasn't exactly like the normal voice. And I don't remember exactly why they cast him. And because, okay, now you're going to think I'm an idiot because I wrote a Scooby-Doo show, but who did the voice before him?
Casey Kasem.
Okay, now, the reason was, okay, now it's all coming back to me. Okay, the reason was at the time, Casey was pretty old. And they were worried that he might not have the energy to do it. And I remember saying to them, that's all come back to me now. Okay, I remember saying to them, well, why don't you just let him try? And they were very political at Warner Brothers. They'd make their decisions and you couldn't really sway them. So what I did, as a nod to Casey Kasem, is I said, can I at least write a part for him? And I wrote the part of the uncle for Casey Kasem. And he did those lines. When the uncle would check back in those holograms, which I just remembered now, Casey Kasem would do that voice. But there was also a lot of, as my Jewish friends would say, mishigas about Casey's wife at the time, who I didn't get the sense that there was a good relationship between her and Warner Brothers. But, once again, I don't know whether that was Warner Brothers' fault for not necessarily wanting Casey to do the voice or whether it was her. I mean, I judge not in that scenario. But now I remember that. And I do remember that, obviously his voice was great. And I remember now saying, well, because I'm always sensitive to people. And I remember saying, well, can we at least write a part for him? And they said, well, what part would that be? It was, well, Shaggy's uncle, because he can sound like Shaggy. And I remember him being happy with that. you know. And I don't remember exactly how old he was or what the real deal was, but I do remember there was some sort of ageist point of view about, does he have the energy to do the voice? Maybe. Oh, and this would just be a guess. It came down to money because everything does, as might be evidenced by the fact that the Southeastern Conference is trying to get kids to play college football in the middle of a pandemic because college football is a $4 billion a year business. So I don't know what it was really about, but I remember Casey being really a sweet guy. And I remember, trying to be nice about that, trying to be sort of thoughtful. And that's my only memory of it. And like I say, I have no judgment of I don't really know what the mechanics of why they went that way, but I do know it was voiced to me that there was a slight fear about energy level, but who knows? Because I thought he did the voice of Shaggy's uncle really well. Yeah, I didn't think there was any problem at all. I thought he did a great voice. So, I don't know. That's what it came down to. It's I have to say it's a very ageist business, and it's it just is. They really. I mean, it's hard when no matter how good you are, no matter how sharp you are, no matter how more qualified you might be than someone else, they really do. The whole entertainment business really does angle itself towards the youngest, cheapest people they can get. And it just is what it is. It's just nothing to be bitter about.
And was the show always going to have 2 seasons, or with the political problems at Warner Brothers, was there ever going to be another one?
You know what? Somebody else reminded me that there actually were 2 seasons. So when I look back at the show, I remember it as one brutal, funny blur. But I honestly think that there would have been more seasons. Yeah, and in fact, I think there would have been a lot more really good things made at Warner Brothers, because I have to say, Chris Keenan was a great development guy. He's very smart, and he's funny, and he knew exactly how much to sort of just turn people loose and do what they did. And working under him, Kim Christensen, who later retired, just blew the business off completely. She was the best development person I've ever worked with. She was really smart, really had a kid sensibility, and once again, really turned you loose. And so I think it was really a great environment for making really great shows. I mean, I would have never left Warner Brothers if I didn't have to. Whereas I would have left Nickelodeon eventually. Eventually, I would have said, I'm just not doing this anymore. As grateful as I am for my run there and all the fun I had there and so many good things about that job, I would have eventually left. But Warner Brothers was the perfect job for me in the standpoint that had the great balance between professionalism and sort of a garage band sort of attitude that I think animation and the game business and things like that exists best in. Nothing was overthought. But I have to say, weirdly, I'm enjoying working for Disney Plus right now because they're so thoughtful about quality. So everybody has their good stuff, but I think there would have been more seasons. I think there would have been more seasons of that and some other shows. And I think there would have been some really fun, good new shows. And I honestly think that if Scooby had gone on, I would have probably brought the rest of the gang in and done variations on different cast members with each other, different character dynamics, because television's all about character dynamics. It's about, which is why you want number 1 and number 2 with Dr. Phibes, because they drive him crazy and the dynamic's fun. It's why you want Mr. Spock and Captain Kirk, it's why you want Patrick and SpongeBob, and Squidward. It's a perfect, triangle of character dynamics. So I think some of those original characters were really fun. And I think bringing, for instance, that whole gang in on missions that Scooby and Shaggy were leading, they were in charge, but sort of wrong-headedly in charge of, and having the gang being like, oh my God, what's going to happen here? And then it all working out in the end correctly by accident, I think that would have been a really fun dynamic. And I have no bad feelings about those other characters. It's just that I was asked to do a whole new thing. So yeah, I think the show would have gone longer because kids really liked it. Apparently, they focus tested through the roof.
And did you have any storyline ideas in particular if it had gone longer?
You know, I mean, I have no idea what I would have done, just from the standpoint that I had to make it all up as I went. you know. But I know this: I could have come up with endless stories for it, and I would imagine what I would have done is I would have done a heel turn with Doctor Fives. In other words, Scooby and Shaggy would have saved him in some episode after he tried to destroy them in the most, heinous, ridiculous way. And he would have made some sort of heel turn to become their friend, and a new villain would have stepped into the fray. That's probably what I would have done, knowing the way my mind works. And who knows, who knows what I would have done beyond that. But I think I would not have had probably another season of the Dr. Fives character chewing the scenery for 6 pages at the beginning of every episode, because I was writing them in real time, and I probably would have said, I would have gotten a break between seasons, and I would have definitely gone to work and pushed it forward and done some new stuff. But I don't know. I don't know, honestly, what I would have done. I know I would have made it better. Not saying that it was bad, but that's what I always try and do. And I'm sure I would have found a way to do that.
And personally, do you have a favorite character on Get a Clue?
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Fives is my favorite character. I mean, because he made me laugh the hardest from the kid part of my brain. Um, you know, but I have to say, I love both Scooby and Shaggy. They're wonderful. So I really love those characters, but I really did love that character. And I was a huge fan, and I always have been a huge fan of Doctor Strangelove. And when I talked to Jeff about doing the role, I said I want to do ridiculous, over the top, psychologically flawed, broken, loser Doctor Strangelove. And so the character makes me laugh, and I liked him quite a bit. I mean, when in the records, no one could keep a straight face when he recorded his lines. I mean, people had to leave the room. I mean, he's first of all, Jeff is. You look up his IMDb, and he's ridiculous. I mean, we would bring him in on shows at Nickelodeon, and we would say, can you do this character actor mixed with this character actor? And he would spontaneously blend, 2 characters together in his head and kill it. I mean, there was a point on Fairly Odd Parents where a young writer wrote an episode of the show, and we had Adam West do this ridiculous character called Catman. And inherent in the character was Catman was a senile, crazy old person in the senior retirement home for superheroes who didn't know his show wasn't real. So he thought he was really a superhero. But it treaded a very thin line of respecting sort of Adam West's character and Adam West as Batman. And the writer went overboard, and Adam West refused to ever do an episode of Catman again. And I felt terrible. I didn't write it, and it was approved by someone above me. So I voiced the concern. But we brought Jeff in, and he walked into the room and did a funnier version of Adam West doing Catman, and with absolutely no warm-up. It was crippling. So he's amazing. And like I said, once again, I mean, for people on the outside of the actual process of animation, everyone is so important, but voice actors are the gods and goddesses of that business.
And do you have a favorite episode of Get a Clue at all?
God, I wish I remembered one. Well, I remember an episode where Dr. Fives get turning into a kitten. And I remember thinking that was funny. uh, and what I remember was at a certain point, I just remember the episode I kind of remember the most because I decided to take on something kind of crazy. Was I wrote some episode that was called something like the mystery solver's mystery of the mystery solver's mystery or something. And I had written actually the Canadian version of, the Canadian production version of Alfred Hitchcock. I don't know if you know about the Alfred Hitchcock series that was on it was on in like the 60s. It was Alfred Hitchcock's Presents. It was before my time, but it was great. I mean, it was written like at the level of a mystery movie. And back in I think it was the late 80s, maybe 90, they rebooted the series, and I wrote a few. So I knew how to write a real mystery, like a multi-layered mystery that you have to put on like 3 whiteboards at once because you can't remember what the real what the real truth is because you have so many red herrings. And I decided to write a real mystery, like just to go crazy and write it. And I remember it was this incredibly complicated story with turn after turn upon turn upon turn upon turn. And what I remember about the episode was when I asked if kids liked it, all the focus test kids responded to was they thought the funniest part was when the hatch door kept slamming on Dr. Five's head. And it killed me and once again reminded me, for kids, you got to keep it simple. But I'll say this. I remember an episode or two, one in particular that I didn't think was up to snuff because the schedule was so horrible and the script came in and it was so bad that it had to be literally rewritten from page 1 and recorded in a day. And that was an episode where they went to a country club. And I remember just thinking, this is just so middle of the road. And there were a couple of episodes like that I just felt like, God, just give me a little more time. It doesn't matter, and there were a few that were sort of weak like that. But I remember for the most part, I mean, I know that the first chunk of episodes I really, really liked because I had more time because, the schedule wasn't folding over on itself yet. And I remember liking the finale, the 2-parter. But like I say, I mean, I remember coming home from that writing that script, my kids being off school the next day. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to do all these things. And then sort of realizing that I was in the kitchen 4 days later, having done nothing but kind of wandered around the house in a daze with a cold brain. So it's hard to remember any of it to begin with. So I apologize for that. I don't remember a favorite, but I do remember enjoying writing the one where Dr. Fives turned into a cat. And I remember writing, I remember there was one in space that made me laugh, I think. But I like them all. And so I'm going to revert back to that super lame answer. I liked them all.
And if you could go back and maybe have a little bit more time, would there be anything that you would change that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think so. I think I would have taken the time, because it's the last thing that it's hard to do. I would have taken the time to put more heart into the show because, most of the time, all I had time to do was plot a fun story with enough danger in it, enough turns in it, and sometimes mystery elements, sometimes not, to keep it fun and to get it in on time. So, and I probably would have, the other thing I probably would have done was I would have pushed Scooby and Shaggy to grow a little bit. But when I did that, Warner Brothers kind of pushed back because they wanted the characters to be very elastic. They didn't want to stretch the characters. And I understand that because it's a huge franchise. Like, for example, my partner and I just did a couple of rewrites on an Ice Age movie for Disney Plus, and there's a couple of characters of these moron possums named Crash and Eddie, and they were open to pushing those characters because they were driving a movie. So you could write dialogue where one character could say, Eddie, I've been thinking, and the other character would say, what? You what? why didn't you, and you didn't mention that? Why didn't you tell me? How long have you been doing this? Because they don't think, they're morons. And I would have done that a little more with Scooby and Shaggy. I would have pushed them. I probably would have pushed their emotions a little more in terms of their inherent love for each other, which I think is very sweet, and maybe made them a little smarter.
And of course, unfortunately, over the years, this show has kind of gotten a lot of negative feedback. But what was the feedback when the show was first airing?
Well, all I know is this. The development process is what it was. It was really shotgun, really fast. And I know from kids who focus tested the show when it was still in focus test zone here, and from friends who lived in Canada and whose kids watch it there. From my understanding, is that kids really liked it. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I know the kids that saw it, that I know, because loved it, because I did at the time have DVDs and showed it to kids, and kids thought it was hysterical. So yeah, I mean, I understand why, because it's not a purist version of the show, and it's a beloved franchise, and also because a lot of people who review things are not kids, and it was by no means made for anyone but kids. So, like I said, I don't care at all what adults think of anything I do. And like I say, I mean, for me, I mean, I never look back. I mean, the people I work for love the show. They hired me for a lot of other things. I had a ton of fun doing things afterwards. And I was sort of told by another guy who talked to me that I got the sense that people hated the show. But like I say, I don't care. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. It was built for what it was. It was the similar thing every week, and it was just really character humor, and it was fun. And like I say, it was fun to do and fun to write, and that's what it came down to. But I know, like, from your point of view, you're a kind of a scholar of probably of animation. You're interested in it from that aspect. But it is interesting when you talk to someone from the inside who'll be honest with you about what a crazy mayhem filled breakneck schedule people write things on sometimes. It is pretty crazy, and it's amazing to me that anything good gets made. And a lot of times it happens because the person running it is sort of the animator and the writer, so they sort of own the franchise in their head, or something just works and people sort of give it the time to actually work. But it is very hard. It's very hard to do. It's hard to do good things, period, in the business. It's with all the people that weigh in, and with the schedules that exist. Like I say, now I'm in this really interesting dynamic, because when I was working for Fox on the Night at the Museum franchise, they they were like, this is fantastic, but of course then they stopped paying you. But they've got Alan Horn and Alan Bergman and the very top brass at Disney reading every script, and they give really smart notes, but every time they give a set of notes they have to pay you again. So it's like, okay, I'll make this better. I always like making things better, and it's become this kind of funny circular job. And it's like, that's what you have to be with. You have to either be with a group of people who let you go and you can make it good and they don't get in the way, or people who are obsessive about it being perfect. And I think both those paradigms work.
More broadly, why do you think that a cartoon like Scooby-Doo about a mystery-solving dog has held up for over 50 years now?
Oh, okay. That's there are a lot of reasons for that. And I'll run through them as quickly as I can. First of all, talking dog, money for the most part. Kids like dogs; they like animals. The combination of Shaggy and Scooby is really speaks to kids, in my opinion, because first of all, a lovable dog, which kids love. Second of all, a lovable guy who loves his dog, and the dog loves him, right? So there's a lot of heart tied up on those two characters, which also speaks to kids, and it speaks to boys and girls, even though boys are less likely to admit it. And when they're watching those two characters, mysteries, for some reason, kids love mysteries. They engage them. They're an interesting form of storytelling. You're never bored. You're always sort of dragged along thinking what's going to happen. It keeps kids thinking and engaged, and so I think that's a great formula. I think a group of friends, for the rest of the characters, hanging out together. Kids are social. They love that. Girls are social for one reason. Boys are social for other reasons, but they're both social. I think the fact that there were prominent girl characters and male characters, and the girl was the smartest character, was really groundbreaking. I think that was something that was, way overdue. And I think girls loved it from that standpoint. There was a girly girl and a super smart girl. And then there was a handsome guy and, and a goofy guy. And it sort of hit every archetype for kids. There were people that kids could relate to. So now they're engaged in a story because it's a mystery. They love the idea of a group of friends hanging out together, going on adventures. Kids love vacations. They love going new places. You put them in an RV and they're happy as hell no matter where you take them. So they loved all that. And then I think when it came down to it, it was just scary enough to keep kids like, ooh, I want to look, but I don't want to look. But then what really cleverly or luckily balanced that out was they were really with Scooby and Shaggy, I think, in their sort of heads. And they understood more of the mystery than Shaggy did and Scooby did. And they were less afraid than the two of them. So they felt brave. So in a weird way, it was empowering to the two of them. So it's one of those formulas. And SpongeBob is another formula I could break down for you mathematically like that as well. That whether it was stumbled upon by luck or by science of how shows work and engage kids, or both, I think it had everything that you would need on every level to engage kids. It had every piece missing. It had every character to relate to. It appealed to both boys and girls. Mysteries are engaging. All the things I said. I think everything about it rather than just one thing about it, if that makes sense.
Definitely. I think that covers all of the questions that I had for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to add at all?
No, I mean, honestly, I don't do many podcasts because, no one knows where to find me. But I would just like to say thanks for checking in. It was really fun actually talking about the show. It sort of reminded me of some fun things that I had sort of forgotten about, engaged in what I'm doing today. And, I appreciate you turning it on and watching it a second time after the first time and not just turning it off.
Of course. And just before we end here, do you have anything that you would like to promote that you've been working on recently?
Well, I guess I would promote it. I would say that right now, what I've been doing largely for the last year is I've been working on what will be direct to streaming movie franchises for the new Disney Plus through the old Warner Brothers franchises. So I would say, tell people that eventually to look out for a new Ice Age they're making called Buck Wild, which my partner and I did sort of a page one rewrite on, and we're doing a whole other set of rewrites for the original movie producer. So that I think that'll be fun when it comes out. And the other thing is we're doing, they're going to produce an animated version of Night at the Museum, which is the movie franchise, which I love the franchise. And we'll be doing that next. And, to look out for that, because I think they'll both be really good. I think they'll both be really high quality and really well written and really good kind of family franchise movies, and, then there may be a really big project I'm doing for them that is an old Fox-owned classic comedy, but I can't comment on it until they agree that they're actually going to make it. But I would reach out to you and I'd let you know about that if they greenlight moving forward with it.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, so those are the two things I'm doing, and it's kind of full time because there are two movies. We kind of just go in a cycle from one rewrite to the other,
Perfect. And one thing that I like to ask is whether there's any websites or social media channels where people can follow what you're up to.
It's an interesting question, and there aren't right now. But what I'll do is I am going to put something together, because what I've started to do, and I've been doing it for years. I've been doing it, for years for people I hire. But I've started consulting for people who want to be in the business and helping people separate from actual consulting. So at some point, I'm going to definitely develop an online presence to do that, and I'll let you know when there's some site people can check in on for sure.
Perfect. Yeah, I will definitely add that once you have it. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today, Ray.
Oh yeah, no worries. Listen, it was really nice. You were fun to talk to, and like I say, I hope you don't have too much editing to do due to my rambling. You can probably just cut out whole sections and be fine.
No, not at all.
All right, well, listen, you have a good day, and I'm sure I'll talk to you again.
And that concludes today's episode. Another huge thank you to Ray DeLaurentis for taking the time out for the interview. For more groovy content, be sure to check at Unmasked SD on Twitter, at Unmasked SD Podcast on Instagram, or at unmaskedsdpodcast.com. You can also find the podcast on Facebook under the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo podcast. If you like this episode and want to hear more, also make sure to check those social media channels or the website. Or you can listen to older episodes wherever you like to get your podcast fix. Thanks for listening, and keep an ear out for the next episode. Scooby-Dooby-Doo!